Hey, what's going on everyone? My name is James and this is a new video series I'd like to introduce to the world called Nostalgia Blind. The idea behind this series is to hopefully shine some light on underappreciated games in a franchise due to another title having more popularity. Hope you enjoy the video and please feel free to leave a comment on whether you agree or disagree with me. Now, not much can be said about Ocarina that hasn't already been said. It's a phenomenal game that begins Zelda's jump into the 3D world. It has great gameplay, characters, side quests, all the things people would say. It's a pretty good freaking game. I mean, at least I think so. It's only one of my favorites. But it is also sometimes praised just a little too much. What do I mean? Well, usually when people talk about the Zelda series, either you bring up Ocarina of Time or A Link to the Past. Both are usually on most top 10 lists. But here's the issue with that. Ocarina of Time isn't that amazing. Usually when people say this game's top 5 material, they haven't sat down and played it in a while, so they have fond memories of playing when they were younger, aka nostalgia, therefore making them nostalgia blind. Now, I'm not going out of my way to overanalyze the game or anything, I'm just judging it based off a casual playthrough recently, and I'm going to be comparing it with Twilight Princess, since that game is usually criticized for copying Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time introduced a new mechanic to help with the new 3D environment called Z-targeting, which allows you to lock onto enemies and basically focus one down, because as it turns out, it's difficult to transition from 2D to 3D with no point of reference. It's a very clunky mechanic that sometimes interrupts the combat, be it you lock on to the wrong enemy, or you end up getting damaged by something not in sight. This mechanic was taken and improved upon in later titles like Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. Combat is far more fluent and fun, not to mention Twilight Princess introduces new attacks for a more in-depth combat system. Now in Twilight Princess, they improved on the archery mechanic as well by having bomb arrows and a zoom mechanic. This introduced more ways of utilizing the bow. There was also the inclusion of horse combat, which I understand wasn't implemented in Ocarina of Time beyond using the bow, but it's still a pretty cool feature nonetheless. This added a whole new layer to the horse riding. I don't know, personally for me, Twilight Princess just does combat so freaking well compared to the other titles. Aside from Breath of the Wild, I mean, that game did have the most in-depth combat system. Another thing is the camera, and hoo-wee, let me tell you about this friggin' thing. The controller lacked features to help you recenter yourself when trying to focus on something. Now you could say that's what Z-targeting was for, but I've already mentioned that it is clunky. I feel like that is also just a limitation of the tech at the time. But man, not having an actual stick to control the camera makes Ocarina of Time difficult to play through. Personally, I've always felt the N64 controller was the worst designed controller to date, just because of how clunky some games were to control. And if you ever want to play Ocarina of Time, I recommend the 3DS version, as to me it just feels perfect. However, mechanics aren't the only lackluster thing in this game. Another glaring issue with the game is the story. I mean, like, what's even the point? Why is Link trying to save the land? What's the purpose? He just wakes up one day and some fairy thing comes up like, hey kid, weird tree of the mustache needs to see you. And then you go off and meet Lord Touch of Grey for Men who explains darkness and stuff, and you gotta save the land or whatever. It's a boring reason to do it. You're told to do it because you're the hero and you have to. Once again, take Twilight Princess and you go off on the adventure to save your friends. I mean, sure, it's not the strongest reason, but at least it's better than you gotta do it because of plot. Although one thing I will note is character models in Twilight Princess are, how you say, hideous. I mean, look at this man, what am I looking at? That's so much forehead. I'm not too sure I want to save the uglies, jeez. Even Majora's Mask has a stronger incentive. In that game, you're reliving the same 3 days to try and change different outcomes to save the people of Termina. You collect different masks which hold powers to assist you along the way, and you get to play cool songs. I know the songs aren't that important, but they're just really good. Yeah, I just really like Majora's Mask. It's really cool, and I could honestly talk about it for hours. The point is, Ocarina is bland with story, and it has some major plot holes. You gotta go stop Ganon cause Zelda had a bad dream or something. You collect 3 rocks, and then you go grab the Master Sword, but for some reason, the sword has the power to sue you away for 7 years because you aren't old enough to use it. Like, the fuck? This sword is kinda dank, but it has some weird powers. I don't know, Twilight Princess just has a better story to me. Zant being manipulated by Ganon so he can come back to the real world, only for Ganon to betray Zant? It was a pretty decent plot twist. Ocarina's story is just weak in comparison. I just feel like the game has too much nostalgia around it, which keeps people from seeing that other games are actually better. Yet, on the other hand, people get upset over Twilight Princess because it borrows too much from Ocarina, when in reality, Twilight Princess is just a better version of Ocarina. Now, most like to argue this because over time, the Zelda series developed this formula for its 3D games. But honestly, Twilight Princess is the one that perfected the 3D Zelda experience. It just felt like what Ocarina should have been. Now, you can also argue that Ocarina should get a pass because it was the first in the series to do 3D, but take Zelda 2 for example. People constantly get mad at it and heavily criticize it for being different from the first Zelda. How can you get mad at a game when even the series creator had no idea where they wanted to go with it? I feel as though Ocarina lacks characters that make you want to save the land. I've talked about how there's not a strong incentive to be the hero, and part of that is because no one is memorable and interesting enough to want to save. There needs to be some sort of reason there, and there just isn't in Ocarina. In Twilight Princess, you have a decent amount of characters you remember. There's Giovanni, the cannon guy, all of your friends, even though they're ugly, the creepy bug lady Agatha, Telma, Princess Ruto, and especially Midna. Midna alone makes me want to rescue the land. I mean, she's just an amazing companion to have throughout the game. Her character isn't too complex, but over time she goes from a trolling companion to somebody with a strong personality who just wants to save her land from Zant. I just really loved her development over time. Then there's all the interactions with the kids from the village. You interact with Ilia and Milo the most, and I like the little relationship Link has going on with Ilia. Honestly though, no game did characters better than Majora's Mask did. That game just has so many memorable people with all the side quests you do. Never have I felt a stronger incentive to save the world than I have in that game. Now, I can't talk about Zelda games without talking about the dungeons and puzzle solving. It's basically the meat and potatoes of them. Now, when you ask me about Zelda dungeons, the first one I think of is the City in the Sky from Twilight Princess. This masterpiece of a dungeon is so well designed, I once did a whole playthrough just to play it again. Even the quest to access the dungeon is pretty cool. You have to fill an ancient book with letters spread out across the land, which in turn help you find and access an old cannon. You just have to get it repaired and shoot you into the sky to explore this forgotten place. It's not the only well-designed dungeon though. Most of Twilight Princess has awesome dungeons and temples to explore with difficult puzzles layered throughout them. Best examples are the ice block puzzle from Snowpoint Dungeon and the statue puzzle that protects the Master Sword. These puzzles really challenge your problem-solving skills to the max. Don't even get me started on Arbiter's Ground either. That place is fantastic. I don't know, if you ask me, Twilight Princess just has better overall dungeons compared to Ocarina of Time, which the temples just sort of fell flat with me. The only real interesting one was the Forest Temple. I actually really love that temple, mostly because I enjoy forest ruins. However, Twilight Princess again just kills it with the Temple of Time hidden in the forest. Even the journey there was fantastic, and it's also the same area where you get the Master Sword. Bosses are another thing I just feel Ocarina lacked and Twilight Princess had. The best boss fight of all time for me is the City in the Sky boss fight. I mean, you get to fight a goddamn dragon. You use your double claw shots to scale these pillars, and then you begin to constantly move around on these P-hats, avoiding fire attacks from the dragon. And then eventually grab onto its back and slash at it with your sword. This boss fight is just so well executed, I can't get enough of it. The other dungeon I really loved was the Temple of Time, as I've mentioned before. I didn't so much enjoy the dungeon itself, more or less that I just enjoyed the setting of it. It's a temple you must access after going through these mysterious woods and then warping back in time to a hidden temple. The boss fight is alright, I mean, it's basically a form of Goma, who we've seen a lot over the years. Really, the only enjoyable boss fights from Ocarina of Time was the Shadow Ganon fight in the final boss battle. Most of the other bosses were kind of boring and not very interactive. This is kind of true for a lot of the 3D Zelda games, if I'm being honest, but maybe that's just me. Twilight Princess just executed these things so well, and it made all the fights feel a lot more challenging, even though some weren't. Overall, I just feel Ocarina gets praised far too much, whereas Twilight Princess gets criticized for following the formula set up by Ocarina, even though Twilight Princess did it the best. When you actually take a step back and look at Ocarina compared to Twilight Princess, while it's still great, it's just not as great. Once again, Twilight Princess seemed like the vision they had for the best 3D Zelda experience you can have, and honestly, Twilight Princess should be in the top 5. Anyway, at the end of the day, it is still an opinion on whether you love the game or don't. Ocarina of Time is still one of my favorite games just for the sole fact that it was the first one that I played and it introduced me into this amazing series, which is still fantastic to this day. So once again, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this little video, just kind of let me know down in the comment section below if you'd like another one. I do have a few other games lined up I'd be willing to take a crack at it, but yeah, for the most part, that's it. Thank you for sitting here and listening to my opinion. Catch you guys all in the next video.